Welcome to the Uniting for Kids webinar with Stephen Krashen. We've got a large audience this evening, and we're really excited to have some new faces joining us. So thank you. We're going to start with just brief introductions. So if you'll tell us your name and a little bit about you, that would be great. Amy, if you don't mind starting.
Sure. My name is Amy Carrington, and I'm a former Littleton Public Schools teacher. I taught third grade for 7 years. I'm currently a stay-at-home mom. I've got a 4-year-old and 2-year-old, and I live in Denver, so we're planning to go to our neighborhood school in DPS, not this next year, but the following year. I'm also with Indivisible Front Range Resistance and just interested in seeing, just learning. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Carla.
Go ahead. I'm Carla. I have a daughter who's 12. I'm a nurse practitioner working in mental health and have always advocated for children and do that through my work and also through the school systems as much as I can. I've been involved with the opt-out movement, Uniting for Kids. That's kind of what I do.
Terrific. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. I thought I would show my face for a moment, but I am invited here to learn about the opt-out movement from Lynn Roberts. I am a parent of a school closing, Gilpin Montessori Elementary, and in learning about DPS policies, I'm finding that the opt-out movement may be a way to affect change to those policies that are pretty punitive to our low-income and minority students. So I'm very interested in learning what you have to say. I'm going to remain quiet, though, I think mostly because I just need to be walking around and tending to my family, if you don't mind.
No problem. If everyone will just mute when the interview goes to between Stephen and I, and then just if you have a question, remember to unmute yourself. Sometimes I forget to do that. So, all right, Catherine, thanks for joining us. Next up, we have Susan.
Hello, I'm a parent with 2 students in high school, both in Denver public schools, and I have been very involved in the opt-out movement over the last 4 years.
Terrific, thank you. Hi, Carol.
Okay, here I go. I'm retired. I have lots of time on my hands, so I'm open for any activist kinds of things you want to throw my way. I write letters, I make phone calls, I do a lot of reading, and I am a retired teacher of 20 years in high school, urban settings majority of the time, and then I spent another 20 years working in corporate America for Fortune 100 companies. So I like the combination because it helps me when I see business initiatives falling on public schools. I have a little bit of an idea where it's coming from. So that's my story.
Excellent. Great reference perspective. Teresa.
I'm Teresa Smith. I have 2 teenagers in public school in Douglas County, Colorado. And I got involved in public education issues about 3 years ago through the opt-out movement as well.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, I'm Kayla Kirkpatrick. I have one daughter who is of public school age, but she's not in public school. I am a former teacher and stay-at-home mom now. And I got involved in this a few years ago in my former school district. We were considering public schools because I asked a question that nobody liked, and I started doing research, and this stuff blew my mind.
Well, thanks for joining us. Eve.
Yes, hello, I'm Steve Krashen, formerly from USC, now representing Gold's Gym in Venice, California. I was supposed to be doing this from home today, but we've got a lot of people in the house fixing up our television sets. Everyone in my neighborhood is dumping the original company and going to another one. I'm sure they'll repeat that in about 3 months. So I'm at my daughter's house today.
Oh.
I just got here. And the nice thing about being at my daughter's house is I'm doing this from my granddaughter's bedroom. So this is Sydney Amelia Glasser, my granddaughter, who's joining us today. Most of my life has been as a college professor, and you know what professors do. I'm one of those professors with no knowledge of people's everyday problems, living in the ivory tower, mostly writing incomprehensible papers published in obscure technical journals. But now I'm writing, last 30 years, I've been writing letters to the editor. I think I have broken the Guinness World Record book for letters submitted, but not yet for letters published. That's from a guy in Mumbai, not that I care, but he's published 3,427, and I'm trying to catch up. Also, I've been very active on social media, on Twitter especially, and I'd like you guys to help me catch up to Justin Bieber on followers, and it's going to be a ways. And I've been tweeting in the last couple of days to the President of the United States and to the new Secretary of Education, and I'll be happy to tell you as we go what I've been saying to them. Okay?
And we'll be happy to share your tweets too, Stephen, just so you can get at least within eye distance of Justin Bieber.
It'll take me 4,823 years, the rate I'm going, but taking, omega fatty acids, I'm doing everything right.
Yeah. And Eve, do you want to give a quick introduction too? You're muted.
Speak up, Eve.
Do you not have audio? That's muted. Yeah, we don't have you. We have Eve Cohen, and she has 2 kiddos, and she is a Denver parent and one of our resident researchers, and very involved both with the Denver organization and also Uniting for Kids. Thanks for joining us, Eve. And Stephen, let's go ahead and just jump right into this. I'm looking at this article that you wrote for Substance News, one of the articles that was published, and it's talking about poverty. And what I find most interesting about this corporate reform agenda that's really kind of centered around high-stakes testing and computer learning and standardization is that they've really couched that as a civil rights issue. And yet, what we've seen in terms of poverty is that poverty has actually increased. And I really appreciate, and part of why we're so happy to have you as our guest, that you really recognize that the issue of poverty is probably the biggest barrier to improving American education, and you speak to that. So fill us in on your position on the issue of poverty and education.
Thank you. I'd love to. This will feel so good. I won't have to see my therapist this week. The U.S. government, all administrations, have held on to a particular hypothesis. If we take care of education, that's going to take care of poverty. Let's get everybody educated, give them lots of, teach them how to spell, do differential equations, ancient history, and they'll have all kinds of startup companies, they'll be entrepreneurs, and the United States will do beautifully. It'll be happy times for everyone. So the formula is pump up education, you'll take care of poverty. It's not true. It's the other way around. 1967, Martin Luther King said, if we take care of poverty, this will solve the problems of education and of housing. Poverty comes first. All the research since this time has confirmed this. First of all, as everybody knows, poverty is the biggest predictor of educational attainment, negative predictor. Every single study in the last 30 years has shown that. Poverty means several things, all of which are devastating for education. Food deprivation. Kids don't have breakfast, they don't have enough to eat, they don't have the right stuff to eat. If a child is hungry, they're not going to do very well in school. Number 2, poverty means lack of health care. It means families cannot afford health care, they can't pay the deductible, etc. And school nurses, David Berliner has done amazing work on this. Gosh, I sound like Donald Trump. He's done amazing work. Let me rephrase that. David Berliner has done extremely competent work in this area. What he's found in his research reviews is that well-financed schools are better equipped with school nurses than schools in high poverty areas. There are more school nurses per child in wealthy areas than in poor areas. And what this means is mostly the everyday problems. Children who have toothaches, children who need glasses, Number 3, poverty means lack of access to books. And this is where I've been doing a lot of my work in the last 20 years. Children of poverty have practically no access to books. The only way you're going to become a good reader, look at my work, look at Richard Allington's work, is have a lot of access to books, get a pleasure reading habit. Children who become pleasure readers do very well. They can't fail standardized tests. Children who don't become pleasure readers cannot pass standardized tests. It's as simple as that. You're either in or out. So poor neighborhoods have fewer public libraries, less well-supported libraries. Schools in high poverty areas have poorer libraries, poorer collections, far fewer school librarians, which turns out to be an independent predictor of achievement. And the better the school library, the better the reading scores. The American research was done by a local hero for people in Denver, and that's Keith Curry Lance, who has done amazing work over the last over 2 decades. Our work has added to that and then looked at international. We have found that the school library can just about balance the effect of poverty on reading scores. So poverty is big stuff. You can have the best teaching in the world, but if children are hungry, if children don't have access to health care, to medical care, if children don't have access to books, it's not going to mean anything. Our international scores are considered really low. Everybody complains about it. Actually, they're not that bad. But when you control for poverty, we're up there right near the top of the world. This shows there's nothing wrong with our teachers. There's nothing wrong with our unions. There's nothing wrong with our schools of education. Yeah, we can always get better. We're always trying to. But our teachers are doing fine. When we control for poverty, we do great. Students, middle-class students in well-supported schools score up there with Singapore, #1 in the world. Actually, Singapore is not a country. Did you know that? They score up there with Hong Kong, #2 in the world. Well, Hong Kong's not a country either. But they do very, very well. The problem is poverty, and that's the one problem that no U.S. Department of Education has ever taken any trouble to even discuss, to my knowledge. What I recommend we do, very simple, before we can get rid of poverty, which is what Martin Luther King called for, that means full employment and a decent salary for an honest day's work, etc. Until that happens, let's pump up school breakfasts. Let's make sure there are school nurses. Let's make sure there are libraries and librarians. And all this can be done for a fraction of what we cheerfully spend on computer programs that don't work, that have no research behind them, and the massive amount of testing that kids do. There, how about that for an opening statement?
That's terrific. I mean, it's tragic, but very succinct. So thank you very much for that. And what we did see with Lyndon B. Johnson and the war on poverty was the original authorization of the Elementary Secondary Education Act did expand libraries. And as a result of that emphasis on addressing poverty, we did see gains for low-income children and minorities and children with disabilities. But all of that has really been eradicated. And you sum it up quite nicely. You say, you know, if we want to address poverty, then we need librarians and books and nutritious meals, breakfast. I think even though we have meal programs in the public schools, that we would like to see them be a little more nutritious. And nurses here in Colorado, our nurse to student ratio is like 518 students.
That's ridiculous.
One nurse, yes.
Yeah, it's like 1 to 1,000 in California. It's awful.
Yeah. Healthcare. And so why aren't we doing that? Instead, why are we getting more tests and more standards and more regulation? Here in Colorado, what we saw was the READ Act that basically is an ALEC model that was passed across the country. And it said, if you aren't reading at a 3rd grade level, then we recommend retention. And at the same time, we don't have enough spots for early childhood education. So why aren't we seeing a policy approach that delivers in the areas of books and healthy meals and healthcare?
Well, let me whine a little longer until I say something constructive. First of all, and tell you why the problem is. I'll give you the punchline now. It all has to do with making money for the oligarchy, nothing more. But I'll come back to that. The idea of you got to be a good reader by 3, a good reader by 3 is absolute nonsense. You can get better. Reading at any age predicts reading later, not because early is better, but because any time you get kids reading, they're going to improve. And if you don't do that, they won't improve. The studies, when I say our studies, I mean the whole profession, not just mine. You can get better at any age. The most recent research from the UK, people who read more in their 40s show better vocabulary than those who read less, controlling for how much they read when they were younger. It didn't matter, or what their vocabulary scores were. So when I get to be 40, I'm going to start reading. That's the implication. You can get better at any age. There's no critical period. There is no necessity for these skill and drill methods. The big debate, the phonics debate, we can settle that right now. The Reed Act and its cousins and its spawn have all embraced systematic phonics, hard study, hard work. A little bit of phonics is a little helpful. You know, the basics, the initial consonants and vowels. But after that, it's diminishing returns. Kids who have more intensive phonics only do better on tests in which they read a list of words in isolation. Phonics is not a predictor of how well you do on reading comprehension tests. This was Elaine Garen's, G-A-R-A-N, analysis of the National Reading Panel, which she got from their own data. So that's not the answer. Why is it happening? My hypothesis. Nothing today happens in schools unless the oligarchy makes money. The oligarchy does not make money on libraries. Judy Blume makes money on libraries, which is fine with me. The wonderful authors that we have. J.K. Rowling makes money, which is fine with me. The programs that are going in place are, as we see, massive testing. Despite the opt-out movement, testing is still alive and strong. And it's about to get worse as we bring in competency-based education, which is daily testing, computer-dominated instruction on steroids, none of which has any research evidence behind it. The competency-based instruction, which is, you know, the favorite right now, and coming in under the radar, but it's very strong. It's supported by the new education law. You come into class, you sit down in front of your computer, you do a program, you complete it, you answer the questions, you get a badge, and you can go on to the next level. That's it. They say, oh, it's individualized.
Personalized.
Well, it's great. No, it isn't, because if you don't get through quickly, your teacher is in trouble, okay? There's a push to get through it. Oh, it's individualized in terms of strategies. It's only as flexible as the computer program is. The teacher's job becomes a research assistant, a technician. Now, what will happen? Let me complete all this to get us really depressed. Right now, the goal is, I'm not oversimplifying, more computers, fewer teachers. Our budget for education is $600 billion a year. The oligarchy wants every dollar. The biggest expense of that $600 billion is teachers. Teacher retirement, teacher salary, teacher benefits. You get rid of teachers, you have more money left over for computers. We have been bashing teachers in the press for the last 30 years. We've been praising technology. We've been eliminating seniority pay, eliminating due process, all these things to get teachers to retire early, and they're being replaced by computers, which means profit. The whole reason for the Common Core, in my opinion, is the tests. And the tests are all delivered online on computers that we have paid for because it comes out of our phone bill. Every time someone takes a test, the industry makes money. Again, there is no evidence, Berliner's research again, that more of this testing has ever helped anyone. And let me add, I love computers. I'm using one right now, talking to you. I'll summarize Frank Smith on this. He says, computers are one of the best things that has ever happened to the human race. They're one of the worst things that has ever happened to schools. Computers make possible, Gerald Bracey, to do in nanoseconds what we probably shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So some uses of computers, fabulous. I would leave computer use in school up to teachers who know what to do. Let teachers have a say in how, not a prepackaged, program, flipped classroom program or something like that. from some big company where it's not experts putting it together. Leave the budget. They can add computers, and they will do it in efficient, inexpensive ways that really help. I'll give you one example, if I may, and then I'll shut it for a while. My son, Sidney Amelia's uncle, Danny, okay? He's a math professor, and like all math professors, he has to teach calculus all the time, over and over and over. So a long time ago, when he first started doing calculus, he videoed himself solving problems that students sometimes have trouble with, that you don't have time to go through in class, some alternative solutions. He simply made the videos available. That's all. Wonderful. Cost nearly nothing. We have language experience, a very good method that went out of favor because the industries couldn't make money on it. All you need is a word processor, and it works beautifully. We have the internet where classes can now get websites and share their essays and all these wonderful uses of computers that aren't expensive, don't require artificial intelligence, and really are good under the careful guidance of a qualified professional educator. Okay, I've talked enough.
Our last webinar was really on the issue of privacy. And one of the things that came up is that although it appears that a lot of these apps are free, what's being traded is students' data, and it's being used as currency. And a lot of times teachers don't even know where that data is being shared and who it's going to and how it's being used. But I certainly think that in terms of how that's all being policed, that the professional educators are in the best position to monitor that. And
of course,
we know that they have children's interests at heart because they're certainly not in it for the money.
Right. That's for sure.
I mean, they're in it for the kids. So if anybody's going to be making the decisions, it ought to be the educators. So another one of the issues that continues to come up is this issue around closing the achievement gap. And yet what we're seeing really across the countries is organizations like the NAACP and Hispanic Chambers of Commerce and Padres Unidos and a lot of the Latino groups are really coming out in support of, again, more testing, more data collection. It's under the guise of accountability. And it's with the promise of somehow this is going to close the achievement gap. And yet, over the last 15 years, what we've seen are more children at risk and higher achievement gaps. And talk to us a little bit about why we see these organizations really aligning with corporate interests and working against the best interests of children of color and minority children.
Good. That's a good question because I'm prepared to answer it.
Oh, great.
No, that's a bad question. We have had a problem. We have made a lot of progress in how language is acquired. We have made a lot of progress in how people get smart. And the companies are not applying these theories and are not even aware of them. Here, let me tell you what is going on. There are two wars. One war is language acquisition and literacy development. The group that I've been working with, our work is that we acquire language when we understand it. You first get people to talk to you so you understand, you read books, you hear stories. The result are all the skills, the vocabulary, the grammar. And it's a lot of fun to do, and it works. The old hypothesis, which most of the people listening now are familiar with because it was inflicted on them in high school, is called skill building. If you remember your Spanish class in high school, first you learned all the grammar, you practiced your grammar rules, got your errors corrected, and you memorized vocabulary. And the idea is if you did this over and over again, someday you'd be able to use the language. Turns out, a delayed gratification hypothesis. Turns out it doesn't work. That comprehension has won every single research study ever done. Kids in comprehension-based classes do better in first language, they do better in second language. That includes really good comprehension-based approaches for children, or for beginners in foreign language, second language, natural approach type things, and it includes sustained silent reading, popular literature, and all these things. The public still believes in skill building. That's the problem. Comprehension has not even penetrated. We've been working on this 40 years, but the research is buried in obscure journals. So if you believe in skill building, all the testing makes sense. Let's work hard, memorize your vocabulary. The same thing is true in conceptual knowledge. The best hypothesis for conceptual knowledge, the way we get smart, the way we get concepts, the way we get massive amount of information is by trying to solve a variety of problems in an area that you're deeply interested in. Smart people have done this. Linus Pauling never studied. When Linus Pauling passed away, he knew more about chemistry than anyone who ever lived. He didn't get up every morning and review the periodic table. Instead, he spent 60 years trying to solve all the major problems in chemistry and either doing it or coming very, very close. That's how it happens. School believes in the study hypothesis. If instead we help kids find out what they're interested in, give them good libraries, help them follow up their interests, then the achievement gap is going to be closed. It's going to be closed if we give them proper nutrition and health, if we work up the hierarchy of the human needs, and if we expose them to interesting ideas and let them read about them. I must tell you one case history. Do we have time?
Yes.
Michael Faraday. Remember him? The great chemist who discovered electromagnetism, who lived several centuries ago. He grew up in heavy poverty in England, in London. He dropped out of school when he was like 12 because he had to go to work. Family needed the money. He went to work for a bookbinder. The bookbinder changed the world. The bookbinder not only had a bookbindery, he had a store, bookstore. He said, Michael, while you're working with me, you know, I'd like you to help me with the books, but look at all these books. Take some time out and read. Read for a few hours a day. Do it on my time. It's fine with me. Michael Faraday spent the next 8 years reading everything he could find, fiction, nonfiction. When he was 20, he realized through his reading that science is what he wanted. He got himself apprenticed to a chemist, a major chemist in England, published his first paper when he was 26 and changed the world. Einstein had his picture on the wall. There's that much debt we had to Faraday. Michael Faraday never studied. Michael Faraday never took a test. Instead, he read what he wanted to read, and he got interested in problem solving in an area he was vitally interested in. I think these are the two universals of proper education, and schools can sometimes do a terrific job of making these things happen. When we take these things seriously, we close the achievement gap.
Yeah, and I think that what we've seen over the last 15 years with this emphasis on school accountability is a shift in purpose, so that it's no longer about developing the child. It's about how do we get a proper accounting for teachers? How do we get proper accounting for schools? And so the purpose of that child's education is not about their own interest, their own curiosity, their own gifts, their own development, but now it just becomes an exercise in accounting. And this degree of non-engagement from students.
Yes.
Yeah,
and the degree of positive engagement when you find what you're interested in is phenomenal. The path is a path of pleasure. People who find what they want to do, Picasso said, find your interests, develop them, and give them away. Which is the secret of education. Vonnegut points out this is not a harrowing, challenging adventure, but something that's pleasant the whole way. Scientists say, you know, I did all this work because I was having so much fun. They enjoy their work. Not only that, on all the tests, the irony is when kids do this, they'll do fine on any test. They can't help it.
Well, and we certainly have plenty of testing to go around. So even if we were to do away with state tests, which I know Texas, which is the original home of No Child Left Behind, is literally talking about doing away with state tests. So those conversations are finally beginning to happen. We hope that it's catching. I have one last question for you, and then I'm going to turn it over to our audience for questions. And you touched on it a little bit. You talked about multiple paths. And I know that that's part of your 6-step recommendation, having different paths, and greater flexibility is one of those. Unfortunately, what we've seen with Common Core and test-based accountability is a narrowing of those pathways, and a directing towards college and then career, and 21st century skills that really don't offer a lot of alternative pathways. So, and then, one other thing too, Stephen, I just would want to say is every time we talk about education policy with people who love kids, they talk about kids. And whenever we talk about education policy with like legislators and foundations and business leaders, they never talk about kids. So I just want to say thank you for, relating this to the child perspective, which is sorely missing. Hi, Lynn.
Okay, what was my question?
So your question is on you talked about flexibility and multiple paths, which is pretty much the opposite of what we have. So how do we get back there, and why is it so important for the needs of children?
Again, let me whine a little more before I become constructive. I love Susan Ohanian's description of the Common Core. An untested curriculum combined with nonstop testing. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And the curriculum is basically college prep. The math curriculum is designed for kids who are going to do mathematics, engineering, etc. It's way, way overkill, and we can talk about STEM, etc. And the English curriculum looks like it's for English literature majors. It's, this is not for everybody. The problem is not only have we narrowed the curriculum and provided few options, it's all college prep. And it's becoming increasingly STEM. Two problems with that, of course. Number one, college is not better, it's different. People have different geniuses. People want to do different things. Let's bring back shopping. Let's bring back technical options for those who want it and who are good at it. John Gardner, former cabinet member under Clinton, said that if we praise mediocre philosophy and we disdain competent plumbing, neither our theories nor our pipes will hold water. We must have both. The STEM problem is way out of control. Gerald Bracey said the STEM crisis is the greatest hoax of the century, and he said this about 20 years ago. The idea that we don't have enough engineers. Every single study that's looked at our technology jobs, and if you want to see it yourself, go to the U.S. Labor Statistics, their website, you'll see where the openings are. There's no problem in technology. In fact, we have a surplus in most of the fields. We have a surplus in chemists and most kinds of engineering, etc. Computers, programmers, it's about a draw. It's about even. We have enough, no problem. There are a few small areas in computer software, etc., where we could use some more people, but the real shortages, electricians, plumbers,
mechanics,
construction workers, elementary school teachers. How do you like that? And these are jobs that you're not going to get fired in 2 weeks. These are jobs that are, long-term, et cetera. So let's look at it realistically. Some people, like Teitelbaum, who wrote a very good book on this, said the reason we're doing all this, we're pushing for STEM, is so we can stimulate more visas from other countries and get good engineers at half the cost or 1/3 the cost. Mm-hmm. So it's all to aid the private sector. And again, every single responsible scientist who's looked at this has come to this conclusion. We have a surplus. And yet this has not affected government policy in any administration. Mm-hmm. So we need to get off. STEM is fine. Let me back up on this. My undergraduate work was in mathematics. I fell one course short of a math degree before I changed my major. My son's a mathematician. I love math. I took differential equations, advanced calculus. I think statistics is absolutely fabulous. And, I'm a techie at heart. I like computers, all this, but we don't need all that much. Computer, how to use a computer? Yes, definitely. Computer science, advanced programming? No, not for everybody. Optional. Yeah.
Thank you. And I know our audience is going to have some questions too, so I'm going to turn it over to them. Is there anyone who has a question for Stephen?
It's still not.
Yes.
Lynn, I can hear you.
I don't know what's going on with my...
Oh, you're okay
yes.
now.
Eve, we can see your question, so if you want to go ahead and type it, I'll read it. And that may take a minute. Does someone else? Oh, okay. I've got it on a text machine. I've got it on my text message. And Lynn, I can hear you, just so you know, we can hear you. Okay. Is there someone with a question? And then I'll read Eve's.
I could throw in a commercial message.
Okay.
Here's a commercial message brought to you by my website. I have a website, sdkrashen.com, free download articles, and several books. Do not ask my permission. You may download, use them for weddings, bar mitzvahs, anniversaries, etc. You can use them for your students, etc. So that's sdkrashen.com. Operators are standing by. No, they're not.
Thank you for making that available, Stephen. I'm always, you can tell the good guys because they give it all away. That's,
you can't make money on it anyway. Okay?
Who's on the good side, who's on the bad side? It's like, you can tell because they give everything away. So this is the question from Eve Cohen. The testing regime has been around for over a decade now, and the results for kids have been uniformly dismal. Why doesn't this data turn things around? Why aren't politicians and reformers changing their minds and backing off the testing machine? And what can we as parents and advocates do to turn this around?
Well, they were backing off it a little while ago. And I'll tell you what happened. We had the opt-out movement. As Angela's mentioned, Peggy Robertson and Angela herself were very active in this movement. And we thought we had won because a lot of kids were opting out, like 20% in New York State. And the President of the United States, President Obama, and Arnie Duncan, who has been the biggest fanatic supporter of testing, came out and said, we're testing too much. Wow, I felt so good about this. In fact, I drafted a letter to USA Today. Fortunately, they didn't publish it. And I said, isn't this wonderful? Credit where credit is due. Credit is due to Alfie Kohn, Susan Ohanian, the opt-out movement, and all these wonderful people. Then I read some stuff by Peggy Robertson and Morna McDermott, and they set me straight. Yeah, they're happy to get rid of end-of-the-year testing because we're bringing in something worse. Mm-hmm. Competency-based education, which, as I mentioned before, turns out to be nonstop testing all day long. The answer, and they figured out a way of making more money. The answer is educational practice in the schools is overwhelmingly determined by profit for the 0.01%, the oligarchy. So that's what we're up against.
And Stephen, is the second part of that question is, in addition to opting out, because we do know the power, and we are seeing parents across the country that are not only opting out to those state tests, but they are opting out to competency-based education, and they are saying, no, I don't want my child on the computer, and I don't want the education to be data-oriented and software-driven. But do you have any other recommendations in terms of what we can do now that the agenda has shifted to combat that competency-based education?
I have a revolutionary plan.
Okay, I love it. We love revolution.
If you're captured, tell them nothing. Okay, this is serious stuff. Any revolutionary plan that involves teachers and parents must have these prerequisites. It shouldn't cost you any money. It shouldn't take a lot of time. And it shouldn't get you in trouble or have you lose your job. So here's what I suggest, and it's aimed at solving one big problem, the spread of information. I am convinced that if people knew what was going on, things would change immediately, and the politicians would change and take credit for it. You have an open-minded middle. You have people who are always going to be on the side of the angels. You have people who are going to be against this no matter what, who sincerely believe in skill building. Okay, fine. But you have a lot of people in the middle who are uninformed. When we give them information that they can consider, that's presented calmly and rationally, things might change. So our job is to get this information around. Here's what I suggest. Take 5 to 10 minutes a week, not even a day. on the internet, which is our underground. Follow people like Angela Engel. Follow people like Susan Ohanian. Follow people like Alfie Kohn, one of the smartest people ever to walk the planet. Oh my. I had a bumper sticker on my last car, which I had made. It said, retweet Alfie Kohn, okay? Follow these people, see what they're saying, and share it with your friends. That's step number one. Go to Twitter and Facebook, see what these people are saying, and share it. Then gradually, this will become common knowledge. 6 degrees of separation, it can sweep the country. We are not doing this now. That's why I'm so interested in Twitter. We can start getting hundreds of thousands of people following us with these messages. So this is step one, and it may be sufficient. Step two, if you want extra credit, you can be a participant. In newspapers, every day, they have articles, and they invite comments. And for 24 hours, your comment will live, and people will read it. The people commenting now are not us. These are not the teachers who know what's going on. Okay, these are people with an agenda. The groups against us are very well organized. State your opinion. You don't have to use your real name. You can use a pseudonym. It counts. Eventually, these ideas will start to spread. We haven't even tried. You can do what I do, write letters to the editor. I think it's a great thing. I think I've gotten about 5% of my letters published, which is about average. But here's what happens with letters. I write a letter, and 2 other people write similar letters. One of them is going to get in, because that's how the editors operate. Most of them are pretty straight. If you get several letters on one, they'll choose one and publish it. So when I write a letter and it doesn't get in, but a similar one gets in, I feel good because I assisted. That way we'll gradually get the information around. Let's try it. We haven't been doing that.
I will be retweeting you too, Stephen. So thank you.
Well, that's the whole point. I want to catch up to Justin.
Yes, and I just want to add, and I'm glad you mentioned that, our next Uniting for Kids event is April 10th, and it's hosted at CU Boulder, and Scott McLeod is going to be leading that. He has 50,000 Twitter followers, and he's going to help us, yes, both with different applications that can help identify the information, and then quick ways of redistributing and disseminating that information. So I hope that you'll help spread the word. We have space for 40. We're actually going to be not only learning all of it, but doing that, practicing and doing that. So we hope that you'll join us and help spread the word on that. Are there any other questions? We've got about 13 minutes left.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I wanted to talk to see, Stephen, if you could talk a little bit about, I work with mentally ill inpatient children from the inner city, a lot of places, and I've noticed a real shift in my, I have worked a lot with the opt-out and have been able to work with some of those families regarding opt-out. And in the past year, that hasn't even been an issue because most of these children aren't even in school. A lot of them have already been out, and they put them into online schooling, they put them into homeschooling. So it's very difficult to even present an opt-out plan with any of these parents, or even talking with the school system, because these kids aren't even involved. I was wondering if you're hearing anything about those kind of children and how we can help them.
Are they being read to, stories?
No, really not.
Oh.
And they're in our facility for like a week, 10 days maybe, and there they are being read to. We have age from 6 to 17, almost 18. So there's a lot of things that we do with them, but outside of that, these families are a lot of these families are just barely functioning.
I understand. Let me tell you about one program, this might help a little, called Reach Out and Read. Just wonderful. It deals with children mostly on the East Coast, children of high poverty, not quite the same as your population, but they bring them into hospitals once a year for a free checkup for a child, a well child checkup. While the parents, caretakers, are in the waiting room with the child, a team joins them and reads the story to the kids. And in doing so, models the story. And of course, you know, the children just love hearing the stories. And when they go to the pediatrician follows up and gives them a free book. Mm-hmm. studied this. Even with one book a year, the kids get interested, and we see them, pardon the expression, closing the achievement gap. Just this, a couple of books every so often, closes the gap anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 between children and other kids. My first thing would be read aloud, make sure they've got books.
Perfect.
Make sure that comic books, magazines. I love comic books, okay?
Thank you.
Read aloud.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Carol.
One of the things that I have been stuck on, just as Stephen has, is that oligarchy is in charge of making all these changes and forcing all this testing on our public schools. And because they're so focused on money and greed and badging and directing children in specific directions, in particular the STEM that he mentioned, I'm wondering if, and maybe Steve knows somebody that we can question this more on, or this might be something he's on, but so many parents have gotten away from looking at their children and trying to discover their passion and helping them focus on making a living where work doesn't feel like work because they're doing something they love, just like the several people that Stephen mentioned. So I'm wondering if there's some way that we can refocus as we approach parents to say passion is where it's at. It's not STEM. It's not all this testing. It's not badges and computer-based education and all this stuff they're throwing at us.
If there's someone that's typing on their keyboard, if you could please mute yourself. Lynn, I think it might be.
Sorry, it's me.
Yes, if you don't mind muting yourself.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's conflicting a little bit with our audio.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Lynn, don't let this happen again. We have to write another note to your mom. And, love you, Lynn.
So passion, Stephen.
Well, I think what happens is we can, once we get this word out that this is the goal of education, and this is an idea whose time has come. Let me tell you, it's not just me. Oh gosh, I got the idea from watching this movie. The movie was called The Equalizer, and it's one of the most violent movies I've ever seen, which is why I liked it so much. It was with Denzel Washington, and he plays a retired CIA agent and, beats up at least 300 people in the movie. It was great. And it begins with a quote from Mark Twain. The two most important days of your life, the day you're born, the day you discover why. And it's about how this main character discovered what he really should be doing with his talents to make himself, content with his lifestyle. Everyone's gone through this. The book, The Alchemist, is really talking about the same thing. Find your personal legend. Find what you're supposed to be able to do. It's getting the idea around. That's the first step. It's talking about it, publishing it, and then, it's going to happen. Those in power, the assistant superintendent who wants to become a superintendent, is going to push it and claim it is all his idea, not hers, but his. So let's get the idea out there. That's number one, and let other people work with it and get credit for it.
Are there any other questions?
I typed one in, as you know. I don't know if you have access to that.
You know what, Lynn, I saw it. Oh, here we are. Okay. So do you want me to read it, or you want to go ahead and just ask it?
Oh, sure. I can just ask.
Okay.
So, Dr. Krashen, I used to be an English language acquisition teacher in Denver Public Schools. And I think it's nearly 20 years ago that I first heard you, and I had no idea who you were. And I went to one of these.
You were 14, 20 years ago. You were in high school. Come on.
No. So I was a new teacher in DPS, and I heard you, and I think for the first time I got a real feel for. I don't know if this is what you would say, whole language development for children who are second language learners. So I appreciated that very much. Thank you. And now I work in behavioral health at a health clinic in Northeast Denver, and I do pediatric clients, many of whom come with some behavioral difficulties, a lot of anxiety, and they're generally, they're attending these no-nonsense charter schools in Northeast Denver, and their parents have chosen these schools based on the school performance rating, which is how we judge our schools in DPS. And all of these no-nonsense charters are rated blue, which is the highest rating that you can give a school and makes everyone want to go to it, and especially parents who need the school to help their kids get a leg up, right? They're really dependent on the school. They're not going to say, an average school is fine because I can make sure that I can get my kids what they need. They need a blue school, which is, Eve can talk a little bit more about that because she's done a little bit of research or knows someone who's done research on some of these SPF ratings. But I'm just trying to figure out, and in my role I'm limited obviously, but how can we help organize, how can we help turn the conversation on its head so that parents aren't choosing schools based on these high stakes tests? I don't know where I'm going with this, but that's the dilemma I find myself in.
Don't do better in high stakes tests. That's number one. Some are okay. Some are pretty awful. Read a new book by Jim Horn, Horn. The real problem, though, with all this, and parents worried, is the issue of speed. Making sure your child is up to grade level, if they're keeping up with the other kids. It's all about speed, which is bogus. Mm-hmm. Student goes to the Zen master and says, "Master, if I study with you, how long will it take me to be enlightened?" And the master says, "Oh, about 10 years. Well, what if I work really hard? Then 20 years. What if I become your best student? Well, then 30 years. Why is it the harder I work, the longer it takes? If you have only one eye on your goal, you only have one eye on your work." The irony is, the harder we push to get these kids through quickly and keep up and get at the grade point, etc., the longer it takes. Not only that, grade level is the average. Half of the kids should be below grade level. You cannot get all kids above grade level. It's like Lake Wobegon. We want everyone to be above average. It is statistically impossible. So there is a lot of complete ignorance of how numbers work out there. We got to get people not to worry about speed. I'm sorry, Dr. Einstein, we can't accept your paper. It's one day late. The real world, this is nonsense. Mm-hmm. Get off this speed idea. Get off this idea you've got to graduate high school in 4 years and college in 4 years. It doesn't matter. We give more time to people getting PhDs than we do to kindergarten students. We've got to be on task, etc. And they have to get grade level, which half of them are going to fail. How about that? So these are the problems. This is public information that there's no virtue in getting there fast, and kids should not be in competition against other kids.
And I'll just add to that too, Lynn. I had a long conversation with the director of one of the developmental disabilities coalitions that represents children with high needs. And one of the things that she said is, we need these ratings to be able to tell how well those schools are serving children with special needs. And I said, those are the last indicators that you want to look at. You want to look at indicators that are very different. Look at what their resources are. Look at what their ratios for special needs teachers, the students. Look at what alternative pathways they're looking at. Look at how they're teaching life skills. Look at their policies around inclusion. Those are the kind of indicators that we want to be looking at and making the decisions about which schools to send our children at. If we simply are looking at the ratings, the kind of schools that we're getting are the more traditional, more one-size-fits-all, narrower paths, more aligned curriculums to the test. And they simply are these test practicing factories. Yeah, they're generating great tests, but those kids aren't engaged in their own learning. They don't go off to college and aren't prepared, and they certainly don't have pathways outside of college, because that's the whole goal. And so I think it's part of helping parents trust their own intuition and become critical thinkers themselves, and letting go of this insecurity that I have to have, my kids in the blue rated schools, otherwise they're not going to get an education. We know better, but instead of going and doing those home sites, talking to other parents, sitting down with those teachers, we take the easy and insecure way out of, let me go online, look at the ratings, and then that way I can tell everybody I've done my homework and my kid is in the best school. That's bogus, and we know it.
Just a little quick commercial message for reading. Susan Ohanian, if you ask her what's a good school, say a good language arts program, are the children reading what they want to read? Are there plenty of books around? This is the number one thing, and if you have that, things are going to work out okay. And if we add to this, is the school allowing kids to develop their own interests? These are the basics, the new fundamentals. She says by the time a child, standards, okay, by the time a child graduates elementary school, they should be, dedicated readers, reading interesting books, and reasonably comfortable with numbers. I think that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And finding their own interests.
Absolutely. This wraps up our time. I want to make sure if there are any questions that we get to them. Is there one more question that someone would like to ask, or are we okay closing out the conversation? We are on time, which is wonderful. That was the goal of this session. Okay. Stephen, do you want to just wrap us up with your final thoughts? I know I looked at your 6-step plan for the United States Department of Education, and I just want to tell you that I think you would make an excellent Secretary of Education. And next time that opportunity opens up, I would be happy to forward your name. But I know that you have a 6-step plan, and if you would like to just close us out with that, that would be wonderful.
Okay. I got interested in this when the Badass Teachers Group did a poll of who they wanted for Secretary of Education. And I was mentioned as one of the finalists. So I decided to take advantage of that and actually run for the office, realizing there'd be no chance, but it's a chance anyway to get the platform across. That's the whole idea. 6 steps. Number 1, focus on poverty, of course. By the way, you can get a copy of this on blog, skrashenblogspot.com. It's right there, and it's somewhere buried in my website as well. skrashenblogspot.com. Anyway, number 1, focus on poverty. Number 1 thing. Number 2, more flexible expectations for school completion. You don't have to graduate high school in 4 years. I tell the story of Susan Ohanian's dad, who worked every other year during the Depression, went to school every other year. That's heroic. Today would be considered a dropout. Help students find their paths, number 3. Reduce STEM fever. Number 5, NUT, which stands for no unnecessary testing. We should only test when we know the tests are doing us some good. And number 6, restore recess. Remember Ohanian's book, Whatever Happened to Recess? Mm-hmm. And my conclusion is that administrators who don't allow recess should not be allowed coffee breaks. I would also like to add, we need an espresso machine in the teacher's lounge.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Yes.
Well, it has been a real pleasure.
I'd like to thank my granddaughter for joining me, Sydney Amelia. Yes.
Sydney, thanks for tuning in. What a great grandfather you have there. We're looking forward to the future with you in it. So thanks for being a wonderful example, Stephen, to all of us advocates and educators and leaders throughout the country that are working on these issues. We will retweet you at Stephen Krashen, and we'll zero in on the website and share those resources as well, and continue the fight for our children and meaningful public education. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for this. Wonderful.
All of those, Lynn, Eve, Carla, Susan, Teresa, Kayla, Amy, Carol. We've got a person who's joined us, Catherine. Thank you all so much for being part of our Uniting for Kids webinar. I'll just say it one more time. Our next meeting is not a webinar, it's in person. It's April 10th at CU Denver. Scott McLeod is going to be leading us in a social media training. He has 50,000 followers. He's going to help us do the same.
What time?
Exactly. It's from 5:30 to 9. And that'll be posted on Uniting for Kids, the Facebook page. If you are not receiving our newsletters, please go to unitingforkids.com under the newsletter section and sign up for our newsletters there. We've got yard signs, opt-out yard signs if you're interested in those. And if you're interested in working with us and volunteering with us, please make sure that we get your email address so that we can be in touch and and circle back around. Uniting for Kids is a entirely volunteer-run nonprofit organization dedicated to coordinating the efforts of teachers, students, and parents on behalf of a public education system that is student-driven and meaningful and enhances democracy. So thank you very much for being our guest, Stephen. Thank you all those who have joined us, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, he's gone. Oh, hey, another kid.